Hi, Julie. Can you
Hi,
hear me?
I can see that you're here. Yes, that's great. That sounds much better. Yeah. Okay. Our next presentation is IRP-MS-2, consent-based citing, and please go ahead. Thank you.
All right. Sorry about that, guys. A little troubleshooting. I'm Elisa Trenzo. I'm the Federal Manager for IRP-MS-2, consent-based citing. And just to provide a little bit of context, as I'm sure everybody on this call knows, nuclear energy is absolutely essential to our efforts to tackle climate change. But to make nuclear energy truly sustainable, we need to manage the back end of the fuel cycle, which, as it turns out, is the Department of Energy's responsibility. And part of that responsibility is, of course, finding sites to store and dispose of spent nuclear fuel. But the government has thus far not been able to find a workable site, and we can't continue to save the problem for future generations to figure out. This challenge is so interesting because it's primarily a social one. From a technical perspective, we know how to manage the material, but what we need now is to find communities that are willing to host the site. By putting communities and people first, we think that we can find a solution to this very intractable problem. And DOE is committed to using a consent-based approach to siting and developing a waste management system that builds in environmental justice and equity. So this is where we need your help. If we're going to build environmental justice into the consent-based siting process, we need expertise from the academic community. We're looking for university teams to provide research that's going to shape how we implement the consent-based siting process and how we build out our program and how we interact with communities. So we're looking specifically at this time at identifying federal interim storage facilities, at least in the near term. And we're looking to build issues of environmental justice and equity into the process. So the scope of work would cover all of that and the way that DOE interacts with potential interested communities throughout the siting process. We'd also be looking for research into how to offer fair treatment and meaningful involvement, particularly including removing barriers to meaningful participation for groups and communities who have not historically been well represented in these conversations. And the good news is for this research opportunity, we really want to make sure that it will have a real impact on how we shape our program. So potential scope could include developing programmatic goals and metrics to evaluate how well we're doing. Are we incorporating environmental justice into consent-based siting? Are we building issues of equity and environmental justice into our programs? It could also cover identifying processes and approaches to ensure that environmental paternalism is avoided as we collaborate and consult with communities throughout the process. It could cover identifying ways that the needs of historically disadvantaged communities are recognized and addressed through the consent-based siting process, and analyzing cases of consent-based siting, including suggestions for corrective actions and improvements. And finally, as we move further through a consent-based siting process in collaboration with potentially interested communities, the scope could also cover facilitating engagement with communities. That would include identifying effective ways to collaborate, facilitating mutual learning, as well as being available to communities as a resource to assist in exploring and advocating for community well-being throughout the consent-based siting process. For this work, we're looking for teams that are not just nuclear energy experts, but also include experts from social science disciplines. That would include sociology, potentially political science, psychology, economics, education, business and management, and other relevant areas. We're definitely looking for an interdisciplinary team, and we are looking for collaboration from MSIs, HBCUs, and TCUs for this team. With your help, we think a consent-based approach driven by community well-being and community needs is not just the right thing to do, but our best chance for success. So with that, I will take any questions. Oh, and I should introduce our technical POC. That's Rob Howard from PNNL.
Hi.
Thanks, Rob.
Hi, Rob. Your audio sounds great. Once again, If the audience would please go ahead and put questions into the question answer panel on the GoToWebinar application. I'll be glad to ask them here in the room, the webinar room. Well, everyone, I'm not seeing, oh, here comes one. Hang on just a second. Okay. Would there be interest in studying and developing methodologies for siting nuclear facilities in participatory and inclusive ways? These methodologies would have broad applicability beyond waste facilities.
So I think we're looking for input into our consent-based siting process, but that could be very relevant. Obviously, there's some things that are unique to nuclear waste siting, but certainly it's not, many of the problems that we're facing are not unique to nuclear waste. So maybe.
Okay, thank you. Seeing how industry appears to have successfully licensed CISF, will input from these facilities be beneficial to this activity?
Input maybe from, I think possibly, but not from necessarily like a technical perspective of how they are successfully managing at consolidated interim or at interim storage facilities on the site. So we're not looking for input into the technical aspects of managing the waste. We're looking for input into a consent-based siting process from a social aspect.
Okay, thank you. Does the goal of this IRP include identifying the specific sites?
No. The Department of Energy would have to manage the siting process itself, but this would be input into, or it would be supportive to the work that we're doing to identify a site.
Okay, great, thank you. Is this consent-based siting activity limited to a consolidated interim storage facility or a repository as well?
So right now we're focused on a consolidated interim storage facility, but the work that would be done under this scope would be applicable to a consent-based siting of a repository as well.
Okay, sorry about that, everyone. Okay, next question. Could the scope include how engineering and technical aspects of a facility could influence consent from a community?
Yeah, I think so.
Okay, thanks. Next one is, what timeline do you expect this consent-based siting activity, what timeline in which do you expect this consent-based siting activity to take place?
So this particular award is over 3 years or up to 3 years, but obviously consent-based siting itself will take much longer than that. But we are interested in this scope to inform some of the early stage work that we're doing.
Okay, it looks like that's all the questions we have for this session. So thank you to our presenters and thank you everyone